Welcome to Dutch Ice Dance Diaries. This week's episode is a part 2 to our conversation that we had with Dave Lease from the skating lesson in our first episode. If you haven't watched it or listened to it yet, it's on our YouTube channel and on our Spotify account. We had so much fun talking to each other, and there were so many good pieces that we thought it was very wasteful not to share this with you. We talk all things marketing, how to spread awareness of ice dancing throughout the world, and we just have a bit of fun discussing teams from our past. If you enjoy listening to us and if you would like us to continue, please let us know. We would love to hear your feedback. We are also looking into recording a season 2 for you and to continue this podcast as long as we can. So we hope for your support and talk to you soon.
If you want to build your brand, you actually have to show things and talk about things and get people excited. And I don't know what I know that they're, people could copy transitions or copy lifts, but I always think that the ice dancers and the coaches get a little bit cagier than perhaps they should be going into the season, because it's a discipline that needs interest and intrigue, and they are the discipline that really has the most personality right now, and the most personalities. If you think about it, Chalk and Bates, Gillis and Poirier, we knew Piper when she was skating with Zach Donahue when they were dating, and then they split and they didn't even want to talk, but they were still competing at nationals together. Like, we've been on a journey with the entire Gillis family. We knew her brother, we knew her sister who skated singles, and then she represented Canada. Like, we have been on the journey with the Gillis family. Again, I wanted to know what the father did to support 3 kids.
All of them. Yeah.
Yes.
He was a doctor, right?
Yeah, I don't remember. I think so.
I'm pretty sure, because I think he even served as the team doctor at several competitions. I'm pretty sure at some of the junior Grand Prix or junior worlds or so. I think he was even there as team doctor when Piper was there, but I could be wrong.
Madison Chalk, I remember when she was skating with Greg Zerline, and Greg wasn't even out yet, and they were skating to Cabaret. And
I was so surprised when I saw one day he was just like married, and I was like,
he was married. What? Yes.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and they were neck and neck with the Shibutanis.
Oh, right? The Shibutanis, yeah. Oh, they were going back in the day. This is my time and your time, 2005, like.
We've known these personalities.
Yes.
I remember when Madison Chalk won the World Junior Championships skating to Phantom of the Opera, and then the next season Merrill Davis and Charlie White used Phantom of the Opera, and they were all working with Igor Spielbond, and that was the moment.
Yeah, the thing. Yes.
Yeah.
But I always think it's funny if people get a bit like, oh, that was my lift, they stole our lift, or that was our music, they stole our music. And it's like, unless you do something completely out of the box that no one's done before, and then like right away they are doing the same thing as you have no right. Like, nobody owns Phantom of the Opera, or nobody owns like this type of like.
It's part of the mystery around ice dancing. It's part of the sport, and I love it.
Well, people were saying, because Madison Chalk, she has a Spotify account, and fans they sent us this last summer, and I remember, like, I didn't make anything of it. And then this year it was like posted on Twitter that she had a playlist for her Pink Floyd, and what her playlist was last season was David Bowie. They wound up skating to. So we were doing a Pink Floyd, and I referenced it, and I got like a private message like, are you sure they're competing? It hasn't been announced. And I said, like, well, I can't say for sure that they've announced, but this is the evidence, right?
Like Taylor Swift dropping hints everywhere.
Yes, I love it, right? Keep people engaged.
Yes.
And people said, well, Tessa and Scott did that in 2009. Well, I think they did it at 3 competitions in 2009.
Oh yeah, their Pink Floyd was so nice though, because I think one was injured, and so even though
she had compartment syndrome in her calves, right? And
can't even imagine that.
So we never saw that program at full speed, and we haven't seen the Marie France version of Pink.
But I loved it. I love Messy. I love Messy with like heart. Like that Pink Floyd program I've watched so many times, no matter, even though that's not top tier Tessa and Scott, but I loved that. Not Céline Fabian, the French team. I know that they were not technically the strongest team that's ever graced the ice. I would watch their programs over and over. And like Yana something and Sergey something, the Russians from back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Novitsky. Yes, I watched them over and over, that program.
And she skated with Fedor Andreev.
Yeah.
Oh, after, right?
Yeah.
Didn't
Yes.
Fedora skate with like a bunch of
Well, he
people
did
that
pairs with Jenny Kirk one season. They didn't compete, but they were training. Yeah, Fedora's done all the disciplines. And he was an Abercrombie model, and he was the most like
What?
talented skater. Yeah.
Oh wow.
But and then he became a coach. Yeah. And
But I think
now
that's what
he,
you're saying about skating in this day and age, right? Where you're missing the personality, you're missing the
you
different
really have to
styles.
cultivate it and
Yeah,
not shy away from it. And I
yeah.
actually don't think that they spend as much, obviously, any of those, whether you like them or hate them, the profiles on skaters are important for
Mm-hmm.
getting people into skating. They're not for us, they're for the others, right? But
Yes.
they're really important too because you need fans. And if
Yeah.
how many fans become skaters themselves? I think there are two options that you see about, well, unless you talk about like a parent that just decides for you, typically people get into skating either watching it on TV or they were at a birthday
Yes.
party and they just fell in love with it, right?
Yeah.
So, or their sibling did it, right? So I think that that's really important and impactful to have exposure and getting to know these personalities.
But I've been
So
saying this for years. If you want a successful partnership and you want to be successful in ice dancing or skating in general, it's a political game. So you have to lobby for yourself and you have to create that platform. And the more people you have on that platform, the more success you will be. Because it's like a business, basically. Looking back on my career, I feel like your partnership is a business. So having
yeah,
that platform and coming out with it, yeah,
I
big
always
part of the game.
talk to skaters. Skaters become so afraid of posting their training on
Mm,
social media. But I've suggested to skaters
yep.
even do a Patreon where you show how you
Yes.
really train, right? Like show
Yes.
the real stuff, show the falls and the successes,
Love
and
that.
get people invested in your journey. I think that
Yes.
skaters become so afraid of what if I fall, or what if they say it's under rotated
Yeah.
and then it doesn't get better. But I think that that's actually a
Yes.
problem psychologically where you become afraid, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
if you show warts and all, you can get people more invested in your journey. And I think
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
more skaters show what they are doing across disciplines, the more that they can get people invested in behind them to kind of take
Yep.
away that layer.
Yes.
And I also been thinking a lot about how we have these shows, like right now, golf. I don't know the top golfers besides, Tiger Woods,
Tiger
right? I
Woods.
happen to know that there's a kid that used to live in my town, this Scotty Scheffler. Now he's a top golfer. I don't know his personality, but there is that golf show on Netflix, and I've watched a couple of episodes. So I'm tangentially like more interested, even though I'm not a golf fan. I at least know who the players are. And now they have a
Yes.
show about tennis, right? And they have a show about NASCAR. And these are all docu-series, and they're not really reality shows, right? They're more following and letting their personality. And I think that if you followed the top teams at Montreal like they were doing on the Olympic channel, although I think it was a
Right.
bit sanitized because it
Mm,
was the Olympics and right who was involved. But I think if you had that on Netflix and you
yes.
watched all those teams, I mean, I'm fascinated. And I don't think it's improper to say, but I want to know sometimes if the British team beats the Canadian team,
Mm-hmm.
how does it feel when they go back to the rink on Monday, right? Like, is everybody okay with that? And how do the coaches smooth that over?
I'd love
And
to watch that.
right? And I want to
Yeah.
see, because that's real, right?
Yes.
That human nature is
Yes.
going to say, no, I was better, right? Or no, they spent 5 more minutes with them, or they gave them better music or a better idea, and to know those personalities. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that it would just be fascinating to watch,
Yes.
and I don't think that you have to heighten drama. I think that reality shows have gotten to such a point where people
Scripted.
over amplify and script things. But I think that if you were to take 6 of the top teams at the International Academy of Montreal and watch them on Netflix, I think that the actual athleticism and the personalities of ice dance,
Is enough.
I think it actually interests people. Oh, how
Yes.
much money is Madison Chalk spending on that dress? Instead of
Yes.
hiding it, let's know how
Yeah.
much the Matthew
Yes.
Connell dress costs. Okay, with all of the crystals and
Yes.
all of the beads. Let's watch
Yep.
her design
Can
it.
only
Let's
imagine.
Yep.
right. I
That's
think that
insane.
how they have all the coaches and you know, I think we've all heard about the scheduling that they have in like at Montreal. I mean, I've heard that when they text you, you're expected to reply like immediately at a certain time. So
well, I feel like that
yeah,
makes sense though. I feel like they have to be that rigid. They have
yeah,
so many teams now, and it's
Mm.
like auditioning to be in the Joffrey School of Ballet or something. Like it's an
yeah.
honor to be allowed to be a part of that team. So you have to
Yeah.
take it seriously.
Yeah.
Think
And
about
yeah.
think about if you had a camera on Madison Hubble and Zach Donahue, and then you have Marie France and Romain walking in and say, you know, Madison Chalk and Evan Bates are going to be joining our school. I just think have the camera zoom in on their facial muscles, and that would be really fascinating. And it doesn't mean that there has to be an explosion. You can just
No.
see that that's real life. That's
Yeah.
competitiveness. That's
Yes.
fear. That and
Yeah.
then watch it play out and see how that they smooth the dynamic out. You know, I think the real intensity that it takes to be an elite athlete is fascinating for the average person.
Yes. But also just ice dancing or figure skating in general, so you need to market your sport. You need to sell the sport. And I think that's what's happening in the Netherlands right now, is where we now have two bigger teams, which is really good. So you're able to sell it. Like you need to sell the sport to regular single skaters to get
They
them.
train together?
I haven't seen them together, but I think they do, right? Sometimes in Eindhoven, maybe.
Our two teams? No, so we have, it's funny, we have Chelsea and Shireen, who are really like Dutch born and bred, so to say. And they train with Maurizio in Finland, and
Okay.
Hannah and Alessio
Yeah.
they represent the Netherlands, and they used to train with Matteo Zani, and they switched over to Barbara, I think maybe 1 or 2 seasons ago. So we have Barbara and we have Maurizio
Yeah.
steering
See,
our
but
two
that's
teams.
all you have to do on Dutch TV is show a clip of her looking at him at the Olympics, show who's coaching it, and keep
Yes.
interested. Okay.
Exactly. You need to create that. You need to sell it. Yes.
That's not even
that's
creating. That's just like pointing. That's giving people historical
fact.
background, right?
Yeah.
That's a fact. We all watched it. Okay,
Yeah.
it happened.
It
was
happened.
a moment in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People have forgotten about it, but that's interesting, right?
Yes, it is. It is
when
interesting to be. Yeah.
Aliona and Robin, he
Oh.
was coaching and she was competing, and he was
Yes.
one of her competitors. Like that was interesting on its own, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think that sometimes, not that you have to heighten situations, but I think you have to explain it. And I find that sometimes skating almost apologizes for the competitiveness and the rivalries between coaches. So there was a situation, Scott Moyer said a joke to a reporter last season that his team of Christine Carrera and Anthony Ponomarenko, he said, we're going to kick Charlie's butt or whatever, right? And he was coaching Green and Parsons. And I thought that like, that's, oh my goodness, like finally something like cheeky and almost interesting happened before US Nationals. Well, don't you know, after that article came out, Scott apologized and he's like, I have not respect for Charlie White and the great work that he's doing. And like, why are you like, that was almost interesting. You almost just made
I missed it. Yeah.
want to watch, right? But they apologized for it. It actually like, wasn't a big deal. Like I think in skating, it was like, you said that in tennis or in basketball, people wouldn't even bat an eyelid. They wouldn't think about it, right? Like, of course you want to win. Yeah, let's go do it. And that's interesting that they used to train and compete against each other, and now they have coaching teams that are against each other. That's interesting.
That's cool. Yeah.
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 But like you said, that
skating, it's weird. I think that skaters, because it's a political sport, you're taught to say,
yes,
I just want to go out there and skate my best.
yeah, I just want to beat my last score.
Yes.
And it's like, I'm sorry to my good friend of mine, like, I'm sorry, Tim, but I deserve to beat you 2007 Nationals. We should have been third. You should have not been third. Like it's like
so controversial
to be able to say that, like
even on a YouTube show, to say like this person wanted to beat that person, that's considered like really scandalous. You're drumming up drama. But if you were in a ring, how would Galina Zmievskaya speak to you before a competition against the other team, right? Do you want to go out there and do your best? Or do you feel like
you want to
win? Yeah.
Yes.
You're there to win. And if you don't win, she's not going to give you a lesson tomorrow, because she's going to give the winners the lesson.
and she's going to say
You know?
something really cutting, right?
Yes.
So
Yes, absolutely. And you know, and she wouldn't even give lessons to skaters under a certain caliber. Like you had to earn your right to have lessons with her, and she wouldn't. And if you weren't working hard, same with Tarasova. She tried to kick me off of her ice because my parents couldn't afford to pay skating at the end of the time. That's part of the reason why I moved to Germany. So I could, and I had to pay for the ice each time. I was the only person on her ice that was paying. All of the international people had free ice, you know, oh, you're a star, whatever, you don't have to pay for this ice, this is Taras ice, it's free, blah blah. But I was kind of like a guest on her ice. I was welcome on it, but I wasn't like part of Tarasova's camp specifically. I was taking from Sergei Astashev and Evgeny Platov, and she would sometimes let me join the group lessons and train with them, but I wasn't like a Tarasova student. So I would be on the ice and I would be paying the regular, you know, hourly tickets, and it was like $16 an hour, and I'm like trying to learn to skate and do this stuff to pay for it. So I couldn't skate for like more than an hour a day because I couldn't pay for more than that. My parents were doing their best to pay for my Sergei and Evgeny lessons, and then I started taking from Roman Zaretsky as like a friend, and like so he did it for cheaper. But then she just called me over one day and was like, you weren't here yesterday, you're only here for the last hour of training today, what are you doing on my ice? This isn't recreational hour. Okay, I don't have recreational skaters on my ice.
Sorry.
I just like almost broke down crying. Like, so all of the times that I've cried just from being in her aura, like that is a scary woman. I mean,
Yes.
she has done so much good for this sport, but I like have trauma just thinking about
Her, yeah.
about her, you know.
well, you were the one that told me the story about Galina knocking the muffin out of a girl's hand as she and kept walking. And I asked her about that, and she's like, they were eating cake in front of me. They were eating cake. How dare
How dare they?
This is shock for me. I was shocked. So,
but like those things were normal, and she was like oh, and butter on it, like, oh my, you know, like, and just to
if
take
you
it out,
showed that to the average person, they would be riveted, right?
So that is another question I wanted to ask you, is we have this issue of so many more girls and females in the sport than we have males. And we keep hearing this. Jill and I interviewed Jeroen Prins, and he kept saying, boys, 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 we need boys.
But we've always been saying that. I mean, we've said that since like 2001. And then what's that website called again? The Tinder for your skating partners.
Ice partner search.
Yes. You know, that's when that all started. And I mean, we've been saying this for years, and I don't know if it's ever going to change.
But what can we do about it?
I don't know if it's going to change. I've been paying attention to where people are moving to and from. I think that's changing right now. I mean, I think the old guard of the Igor Spielbaum, Marina Zueva days are, I mean, moving into retirement, right? Mostly, although I'm really curious what will happen with Zingis and Kolesnik next season. But I think by and large, who are the next training? What's going to happen in Michigan? I see people moving to New Jersey. You know, Virginia has some teams, and I'm curious where the next successful schools are going to be in the US and as well as around the world. I mean, I think Montreal can only have so many teams. I think we see stuff happening in Finland. We see Italy and stuff like happen. But where is everyone going to be based out of, and where are the teams going? And I think people moving for partners and federation. And I think also because it is harder to get citizenship now than maybe it was before, another challenge. And I think it's also a reality that people don't really want to talk about or acknowledge, that some of these citizenships or some countries are easier to get citizenship for, and everyone has a cover story, right? I mean, I don't know if you had to have a story about why you became German, right? But I saw you know, Millie Murdoch, and I know them, right? And they wanted her to compete internationally, and they're saying, you know, she's competing in honor of her grandmother to compete for Spain. And it's like, okay, we all know, like, you want to compete internationally.
Exactly.
Spain is an option.
They have a spot. There you go.
Okay. We don't even need the cover story. I don't even care. It's
always been like this. Always.
Yes. But I think that this happens, right? And good for, you know what, if you can afford it. But I do think it's unfair, perhaps. You know, not everyone has the same opportunities. Life is not fair. And
well, that is true. But
you
we
have to be
still need more teams, though. I feel like it's not just about it's not about the inequality. I feel like, of course, that is an issue in our sport. We are an elitist sport. That's just a fact.
sure.
That's going to stay that way for a very long time. There are people, I think, in Canada even saying that they want to close down ice rinks because it's not sustainable. It's not environmentally friendly. It's like they're saying it's a luxury that people shouldn't be exploiting. There are certain levels of like elitism when it comes to skating, but at the same time, I feel like in order for skating to work, we need to have more teams competing even for those spots.
Well, I think it just comes down to that Netflix show that we need to have.
We do need to have, and it needs to be affordable.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think about myself as an adult skater, right? And I've, because of the way the world works and that I live near a training, there are 2 rinks where there are coaches, that came over when the Soviet Union fell apart, right? I've had access to coaches that are very high level.
Yes.
Who, because there aren't as many skaters in the 90s, they need to pay their bills and teach lessons. And because of that, because I'm a very, they take on the adult skater, but I'm an adult skater that's super intense, right? And we're going to work hard. Some adult skaters are less intense, right? But I've had access to high level coaches because of that, right? And because I can afford it, right?
Yes.
And that is another entree into the sport, right? The same way you're talking about like buying, if you can pay in the US, these coaches will teach, right? And
you buy a Russian. That was what we used to call it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, did she buy a Russian?
I love to joke with my coaches, or which one, like, okay, you competed against them. Did they buy the person? Because that was what it was called. It was referred to as rent a Russian in the 90s.
Yes.
And I think that's super problematic too. Like if you think about it, like it's like escorting,
it's
right?
like a mail order bride for figure skating. It's a female order partner, basically,
There are articles in the New York Times about it, right?
Yes.
If you Google and know the right people to look up from the late 90s, there was an article, Tara Maudlin's name, right? Or you, right? And there were even articles, if you go back, I think, that country hopping, about, early Chade. If you go and Google, you could see really interesting. This has been going on for a really long time in skating. And I really compare it to to me, it's very similar to the college admission scandal with how people got into USC through the side door, right? And I think on one hand, it's a really beautiful thing, right? You say that we want these small countries to go to the Olympics, right? We want to open it. So we're going to allow 3 Canadians, 3 American teams, right? 3 Russian when they were allowed. And then you have this like notion that there's going to be a skater and they're going to work really hard in the Netherlands and they're going to but the reality becomes they are going to train in another country.
Yes, it's ridiculous.
Up with someone with a different nationality, and they're going to compete for that spot against a really wealthy girl from America who buys a partner and a citizenship, right? And I think that is the reality of the sport, but it also fascinating to cover and talk about, but icky and frustrating at the same time.
Well, at the same time, I do feel that the Olympics should be, it's nice that it can be represented by all countries, but it should be the competition of the best athletes. So if there are 10 teams from Russia and none from the Netherlands, like that's a result of the system. Like they have government funding in Russia. They put effort and time and money into developing these athletes, or the US or Canada or wherever. And in the Netherlands, we just don't have that for ice dance. Like we have facilities. In theory, it could be possible, but we just have not gotten it right in terms of finding a system to, cultivate a training center.
True.
I don't know if you know this, but our national coach for about a little over a year until a few months ago was Alyona Savchenko.
Yes.
And it's like that was not very well advertised. Like there wasn't a whole social media push. Like people were like, oh, what is she doing? And they decided to put it up in the north in Heerenveen because they are really, do you follow speed skating or short track at all?
I don't, but I knew that Aliona was coaching in the Netherlands, obviously before she teamed up with Robin, and I believe they're back in Germany. So I've followed this a little bit to see what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Right, but it was so short-lived, and before that we had Javi Fernandez was like a consultant or like an informal official coach, and it's just somehow like they bring in these people who have the expertise and the knowledge, who are amazing, but yet there isn't really some like full system in place, something like what has happened in Montreal.
Where there are no
where-
funds and there's no interest in this sport, and that's because we are a speed skating country. So all the funds go to that sport, and there's no interest in figure skating, let alone ice dancing and anything besides that. We now, of course, have also pair skating we're really okay in right now, but it all depends on funding as well and money. So,
but our pair teams, yeah.
Here's what you think about this, is because, the ISU has so many competitions every season, senior Bs, right, that are in these countries, but a lot of them don't have really top fields, right? They don't have, and see a lot of competitions in empty arenas. And whether not the senior Bs, but I always wonder, does it help or hurt a small country to have a senior B if no one is attending it there, right? Like, yes, and like it's almost like one of the steps, but there are so many steps and so many factors that can make a school or a country like really good at skating, right? Like, and I feel like we look at like Finland actually had great crowds last year. I think it's good they have a Grand Prix there again this year. Maybe Russia being held out will help Finland continue to develop skating, because they keep having events.
right.
They have synchro teams. They keep doing it, and like hopefully that will happen. Korea, they have like some skaters. They need to have competitions now.
Well, that's my hope, now that we have two teams, that it actually becomes something and it gets bigger, and we actually have some people that are interested in it, and so people can actually come watch the sport when it's in the country. We have the Challenge Cup here, stuff like that. So
you have the Challenge Cup every season, and I think that's, but they have to market it, right? You have to get people paying attention, right? And it's hard. We had nationals in California in the US last season, and they didn't market it, right? And skating also was hidden behind a paywall on Peacock. So then even we're more enthusiastic fan, but someone that's not willing to find a VPN or figure out how to do this.
Exactly, all of that stuff. Yeah, just make it accessible.
You don't make it accessible, it's so hard to find. And then then it's expensive even to go as an audience member. And at that point, I would get the tickets, because at least you're getting the vending, the vendors, and making money that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was, I think, a really huge missed opportunity. And then I don't know about you, but I don't want to watch an event on TV
when there's no one there.
There's no one there, right?
No.
It seems like, what am I watching? Like, I'm
exactly.
watching that looks fun and exciting, and I think a crowd adds a level of excitement to an event, whether conscious or not. Do you want to? I don't know about you, but
do you remember
when the lights come on at the end of the night? You're like, oh, it's time to go home.
Go home, get out of here.
Feels like you're watching something. Like, all right, it's over.
Oh, I remember that, working at a bar, cleaning up the tables, the lights are on, looking at the people like, come on, get out. That's
your sign. Yeah.
Remember the cardboard cutouts during the COVID era?
Yeah, that was a necessary thing at the time, but also, where were the cardboard cutouts this year at Nationals? Because it was maybe even worse, right?
They should have kept them and used them again. No. It seems to be kind of a worldwide thing, though. I don't know how many, maybe some of the Asian countries are a little bit more, it's starting to gain popularity. Well, I don't know, maybe it's gaining popularity in some countries, but I feel like overall skating has declined, not just ice dance, but
no,
it really has declined, especially since the Olympics. And whether or not you agree with the scores that they were getting, or you like the skating, the Russian ladies provided such intrigue and drama. They were doing quads, they all trained together, and Tuktamisheva was the outsider in the old guard. Now, whether you believe that was without performance enhancing drugs or not, there was so much intrigue, right? They sucked so much oxygen at every competition. And we had the great ice dancers of Papadakis and Cizeron, and they were going against the Russians, and then Yuzuru Hanyu against Nathan Chen, and they all retired. And because the Russians are banned, but now it's like all that intrigue is gone. And because skating hasn't really marketed itself well, it's really suffering because it couldn't afford all of the factors that played. And I thought it was really telling last season, the Grand Prix final didn't have great crowds, and it was in Italy.
It's weird.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's weird and it's sad and it's concerning.
Yes.
And I think it's time that they really look at getting back to what we were talking about earlier, making the sport more understandable.
Well, that's why we're creating this
Six
podcast
by
as
nine.
well, right? Because we want to spread the news and just listen to how interesting it can be, to talking about the sport, but also talking about like the history of the people in the sport, like talking to people like you who have been in it for so many years, and just to get other people really enthused about this and to keep it alive, essentially.
Yeah. And I think that there are people that are really passionate, but I do think that one of the main challenges continues to be even the format of the ISU. So I knew some people that were going to the Congress, and someone told me, well, we really liked this guy. He seemed all about business, right? And even though he wasn't from figure skating, we were going to vote for him. And that's, the current president. And then I heard someone else say, no, but we don't even know if he's that interested in the ISU. Is he just trying to get to the IOC? I mean, I think that they need people involved in the leadership of figure skating that are interested in growing the sport, rather than just moving on to other positions.
Yeah, using it for their own personal gain, getting some kind of position of power versus like you want to do what's right for the sport.
Yeah. And I think that they have to make changes. One thing I will say, we discussed that we don't like maybe some of the changes that are done to ice dance, but what I do like is that they are trying to make changes to make it more accessible to the public. Whether you like the 80s, you don't like the 80s.
Right.
Singles is so far behind. They are so dated, right? Singles, what are they doing? Yes, they added lyrics, but what has happened since? Right?
This is groundbreaking. The singles used to be like the hot thing, right? So
they, like if they even, we have like one choreographic step, people have debated, should there be a spin? Should there be a spiral sequence? I mean, we talk about it every season, but they haven't changed anything, right? To do anything to make it more competitive. And I think that's a really serious discussion that's a decade overdue, but really I think we're seeing it now.
Thanks for listening, and please go to DutchIceDanceDiaries.com to find our YouTube link and all of our other links.